Hi everybody, and welcome to Once Upon a Scarf. This channel celebrates the art of the vintage scarf, from luxury silks to bandanas. Today, we're looking at a classic Hermes Scarf by Dutch artist Zoe Pols. It's a tale of two utopias, which do not match up. Here we see the eternal battle between you only live once and play now, pay tomorrow. Which mindset wins? Stay tuned for the whole story. I'm the author of two classic books on vintage fashion, Secondhand Chic and Its Vintage Darling. I'm a huge fan of the luxury, affordability, and in this case, life lessons in great vintage scarves. And I'm so happy to share what I know with you. Getting down to story time. Here we have a lovely scarf from the year 2000. It's called Pays de Cockagne, which means land of cocaine. No. Not that kind. Cockagne was a mythical place, a land of plenty. We'll get into the details of that in a moment. For now, looking at the design, we see a creator who is really into geometry and perspective. There's a hexagonal fort in the middle, some winged battlements and other buildings to each corner. There's a moat filled with sailing vessels and a surrounding gentle countryside. Little dots of people and animals are here and there. The whole design is bordered with huge garlands of fruit. Like any Hermes scarf, this is completely beautiful on its own, without any further inquiry. But I am always interested about the story behind the design. This one took quite a bit of digging, but I think you will be entertained because it embodies a conflict we all live with every single day. Alrighty then, let's get into it. What was the land of Cockaigne? According to legend, which dates all the way back to the 13th century, this was a dreamland, an imaginary utopia, a place where there was no hard work, no struggle, no backbreaking labor, nothing but sensual pleasure. A medieval Irish poem tells us that in the land of Cockaigne, the food is good, the drink flows free. At lunchtime, supper time, and tea. It's true, without a doubt, I swear. No earthly country could compare. Under heaven, no land but this has such abundant joy and bliss. Wowzers, right? And here we have it all laid out in a 17th century etching from the Raimondini family in Italy. It shows the Italian version, the Paesi di Cockagne, which holds to the basic theme. The rivers run with milk, honey, and wine. Birds roast themselves in a fire and then literally fly into your mouth. There's a lake filled with meatballs. The laziness is epic. People go to prison for working. The greediest man in the village, one Signore Panigon, who's pretty much the mayor, rides around on a pig. The place is one non-stop Mardi Gras. Even today, festivals celebrating this idea still take place in villages around old Europe. As with most debauches in real life, these very often got out of hand. So the greed that was a hallmark of the land of Cockaigne wasn't always a good look. Here's an engraving of the Queen of Cockaigne by Venetian artist Niccolò Nelli. Trigger warning, she is an overindulged woman seated on a movable toilet chair with the food going in and coming out at the very same time. Probably the most famous cocaine image in history was made by the great Dutch artist Peter Bruegel. Here we see the morning after the night before. Four fellas are stone drunk. A pig is running around with a knife in its back, ready for carving. The barns are tiled with pies. My favorite part is this deer, a little egg on legs, running around looking for somebody to eat him. But the fellas are so stuffed, they can't even raise their heads. Look at the look on this guy's face. He never wants to see an egg on legs again. We've all been there and done that. So in sum, the land of Cockaigne is pretty much a Renaissance version of a carnival cruise, with meals 5 times a day, an endless open bar, and 5 different decks to get slammed on. But then, we turn back to our Hermes scarf, expecting to find a bacchanal. But instead of self-serving ham and kidney pie shingles, we see architecture. and fruit. Lots of fruit. The few tiny people here and there are clearly at leisure. Kids are playing with balls. But this is hardly the orgy of sex, smorgasbord, and snoozing as promised by the Irish poem. As a matter of fact, this place seems downright rigorous. A place where you might have to do drilled marching at the crack of dawn, and then spend long hours dusting the battlements and polishing the cannonballs. So what's going on? Well, something definitely got lost in translation. Because what this scarf actually shows is a utopia, for sure, but it's one that is totally different in execution and concept than the slutty old land of Cockagne. Here instead, we see an ideal city, heavily fortified. The fort is shaped like a star and was built like that because the angles of the walls made it very resistant to sieges. Michelangelo was one of the first pathfinders of this type of defensive structure. Incredibly, they would remain in use for centuries. In fact, the Statue of Liberty stands on a star fort. Here we see one of the most famous Renaissance versions that are still standing, enclosing the town of Palma Nova, which was built in 1593. Palma Nova was built on strict principles. Historian Edward Wallace Muir Jr. said this about that town. Humanist theorists wanted to build an ideal city. The main theme was equality. Everyone had the same amount of wealth, respect, and life experiences. The ideal of life here is not the vegetative state of idlers, but the joyous activity of masons, carpenters, architects. Instead of sins like gluttony and sloth, the residents upheld ideal virtues like industry, tidiness, and logic. So getting back to our scarf. Very few people here are having a good time because why? They're all hard at work, holding the fort. I think we can all agree that there was a slight mix-up of utopias here, but it's a scarf, not a mission statement. And frankly, the design is wow, with perspective work worthy of the great mathematical artist M.C. Escher. The four quadrants give a put-together geometric vibe rather than hungover whirlies. And the fruit garlands add a touch of plenty, but strictly within our 5-a-day guidelines. I like the utopia bending this scarf represents, because in fact, there are two distinctly different versions of an ideal world. For some of us, paradise equals a blowout, one that sees us crashed and disgusting on the couch the next morning. For others, and I'm looking at you, oldest siblings, paradise is clean, well-ordered, quiet, and doesn't wind up on a frenemies social feed on the following morning. This scarf embodies that dichotomy, which is pretty much Hermes in a nutshell. On one hand, you get pure luxury with lush colors and sensual drape. On the other, a rigor of workmanship that would make even the toughest drill sergeant smile. Here, the land of Cockagne is under new management, and the neighborhood has definitely cleaned up its act. And that's today's scarf story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please press the usual buttons if you'd like to see more.